Are you feeling like all this technology, information, and current events are just hitting you like whiplash, blazing by you, and you just can't really make sense of it, or there's too much going on at one time? I think this show is going to be a good one to take a step back, look at things from a little bit broader lens, and using some of the information, just talking, not going to bring a bunch of stats out and blow it by you, but just talking to you. I'm going to take you through what I think technology, ways of thinking, and social media today is bringing out the worst in humans in such an obvious way, and how I think we could treat it differently in our own lives and really make the best of it, because it is an amazing time to live. So, without any further ado, let's get right into it. All right.
That's in my brain. It keeps me from wanting to go on, but I want some gain. Maybe a little fame.
The biggest thing that I think everybody can take a look at and realize is that technology is invading every single bit of life, whether you're talking about work, pleasure, entertainment, outside, right? Nowhere can you get away from seeing a phone. You're not really going to get away from screens. It's really changed life. And even for someone like me, I was born right at the turn of the 2000s, right before. And even still growing up, there was so much to do outside. There was so many different things to just escape from having to be on a screen. And you just look at it nowadays. Like I said, when you're talking about work, everybody is using a Google platform. Everybody is trying to make sure that they have all their stuff documented. They want things to be presented on a screen, emailed, right? And that's just one thing. But then you take it a step further with the automation, the AI that everybody is talking about. Not even talk about it, everybody uses it nowadays, whether you like it or not. And unless you're totally off the grid and possibly maybe, going back to our conversation there with Sean Terrio, unless you want to remove yourself 100% and not be involved in really the modern day business atmosphere, you have to be aware of what's going on around you, right? The different apps and the different things that can really propel you and your business. It's one of the biggest things that, even my own downfall, it's just staying up, staying current, and recognizing opportunities, right? And I think that's everybody. But understanding, right, how much this thing, whatever you're listening to this show, understanding how much that has a grasp of your life is, I think it's paramount to being a person today, right? One thing I definitely want to talk about is, especially towards younger people, right? Understanding that younger people's brains, even myself, technically, I'm not 25 yet, so they say I'm not fully formed till 25. If that's true, the amount of damage that all these apps, these algorithms, these social media platforms, all this damage that it does, and I think even just living on a screen, right? Talk about school nowadays. Even in the schooling system, I believe almost every public education platform now, I think, pushes for everybody having a laptop. It's school supplied. It's Chromebook, of course. It's not necessarily high quality, but it's a laptop. Everybody has access, internet access, right? When you think about the impact of what living on a screen does, I just grew up in it. I was the one, so everybody knows if you're not my age, you have a totally different perspective on it. But for me, I got a phone when I believe I was in 5th grade. It was the first phone I got, so I was around 10 or 11 years old. And the first iPhone I got was 2 years later, so I was either in 5th or 6th grade. So that first phone, right, and how much that changed my perspective. I remember having to get convinced to go onto the first social media platform that I really got, which was Snapchat, I believe. If I had to guess, Snapchat was probably the first one, but the first one I remember actually being a social media platform that I had to get convinced. Like Facebook, I got it for games, but Instagram, I remember I didn't really think it was a good idea, and yet I got it anyway, convinced by someone long in my past. And looking back on it, I can't imagine what it would be like if I had actually held strong and said no in that moment. Because when you get let's just go down Instagram for a moment, because Facebook has a lot of text involved. But when you're talking about Instagram, it's picture and video primarily, and the amount of emotion and pull that you can get from just one picture, video, piece of art, right? They say a picture has 1,000 words. Well, what if you're putting thousands of pictures in front of you? One thing that you're doing to the emotional effect that you should have to a picture, to a video, right? used to be, and I'm not saying that this is a good thing, I'm just pointing out a difference here. It used to be that if you were going to go watch something on the screen, let's go back to, earlier 1940s, 1950s, 1960s America. If you're going to see something on a screen, you either have one small TV set in your house, and maybe you watch the news or you watch whatever the family's watching. Or if it was before that time, you go to a feature film and you're watching one thing that everybody's been looking forward to. It's coming out on this date. And now we've transitioned into, yeah, you could live that way. But even if you're living that way, you're using a screen in order to download the tickets. And then once you get the tickets, you got to scan that thing in. Once you get there, you're using it to get to the directions on here in order to go to the place, right? The different ways that these things are interacting. And now almost every single new car has a screen in it. I don't think it's almost every single new car has to have a screen in it. I believe it's required now if you're in America. So all I'm saying is the amount of impact that this might be having on us, I think, not good or bad, but I think we need to recognize that we are becoming basically indistinguishable with these mechanisms. And whether we want to admit it or not, putting a chip in your head, I don't think changes anything, whether you're any more machine or not, because we're already attached to the hip by these things. Now, what this means when you're carrying it into everyday life, I think it, like I kind of mentioned before, it goes back to work. But when you're talking about kids, it goes back to education. Okay, and I think back to if I had social media when I was 12, 13, 14 years old, and I just can't imagine how much it would have affected me. I know by high school I had it. 8th grade going into 9th grade, I definitely had it, was into it, and it was affecting me then. I know for sure now. But I'm saying in those formative years, like kids are having things, at that age when I got my first phone, didn't even know that Facebook or Instagram was going to affect my life. These kids have access to this from the get-go. They have a computer that's given to them for education that if a kid is halfway smart, you're going to find loopholes around whatever firewalls they have. And if not, you're going to convince your parents that that computer's not good enough. You need to get me my own, right? And this is just what the pathway leads down. And like I said, you start leading that into the education system. Obviously, it's going to filter into work. It's already plastered through our university systems. If you don't have a personal laptop to work off of, I don't think you're surviving modern day university. That's just being honest. That's just one aspect of our lives, right? Is these screens. And another thing that I kind of want to tie into this, especially when it comes to the educational aspect, is something completely different. Right. So modern day education for me failed. Okay. Failed to get me interested. I don't know about any of you guys, but the way that the public school system, at least for me in Montville, New Jersey, high school that I went to, you can look it up if you want to. So it's public information. The whole structure, looking back on it, everything after elementary school, because really elementary school, if I had to look back on it, honestly, was probably the best of my formative and structured schooling experience. And I really look back on it fondly. But moving on from that, moving into middle school, okay, traveling for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and then the high school. For success for students and the different systems put in place to steer kids away from danger, I think, are two things that just based off of my own experience don't work. Now, that doesn't mean they can't work. However, I do think that the modern system definitely struggles. Honestly, a wink and nod type of attitude towards people who are just good enough to make it through any system, so the system doesn't matter. Or maybe I'll rephrase that. It doesn't matter how flawed the system is, because so many individuals are just poised enough to make through it. That doesn't mean it's a good system because you're churning out decent human beings. That means that you have a lot of good human beings. That's just my opinion here. But like I said, going off anecdotal, I want to talk about a couple different things relating to my relationship with counselors in schools and why I think they're so ineffective, particularly to men or boys, obviously, as they're growing up if you're in school. So let's get into it. My first relationship with a counselor was, and I didn't really even know what a counselor was until I got to, I guess, 7th grade. I think it was 7th grade. So everything else, right? So like if you needed extra attention or you needed an aid, that was an aid, right? And that was looked at as you were different. And I don't think that that's a good thing, but it is what it is, right? Like if someone has a speech impediment and you're going to tell me that 7, 8, and 9-year-old kids are not going to talk about it, you can do whatever kind of campaign you want, whatever kind of silencing technique or punishment. When push comes to shove, at the end of the day, kids are going to make fun of it, right? And that doesn't make it a good thing. It just means that that's how kids are. It's the same way if someone weighs 500 pounds, kids are going to say that that person's fat. Are you going to avoid it? No. Does it mean it's a good thing that the kids are doing it? Not really, but what does it really mean as a society if we get so upset that kids are calling someone fat? If something is an objective truth, or in some senses needs to be said, right? Maybe not the way that things are said, but what is it to be upset and to control in that manner, right? And a lot of times this affects boys, of course, being unable to control their words and mouth in a classroom, in just classroom setting. But this is where the system starts to beat down on, I think, being creative and being able to actually use your brain to have formulating experiences where you learn from them rather than just getting punished and not knowing what happened. So my introduction to a counselor, 7th grade, the first thing it was, "Hey Sal, how you doing? It was Hey Salvatore." They had no idea what I wanted to be called, and that's fine. I told them. And it really felt like someone just didn't know me. They were just trying to pick my brain to fill out a sheet. And I felt that 7th grade. I felt like this person really isn't guiding me. They basically, maybe I need to take a step back. The first introduction to their program would have been 6th grade. And this is when you had to fill out a careers and basically job, just, what do you call it? A scattergram? Something where it's like 50,000 questions trying to determine what your family does, what you might have preclusions to wanting to do, what might you want to try, all this stuff, right? Then you get introduced to the counselors in 7th grade and check in on your grades. They do basically a brief, I would say, mental checkup as much as you can for a young person to make sure they're on a good track. And then they just let you go back in, and they follow up with that job scatter board with another version that's a little bit more dialed in based on your answers the previous year. And that's 7th grade. And then 8th grade comes around. And this is where problems started to arise for me in school, right? So at this point, I'm having struggles with my grandparents, which is totally, totally outside of everything. But I don't really know how to process the grief, death, or sickness. I'm not doing well with communicating with my family because my family is very quiet. So I'm taking things out on my teachers, my fellow classmates, and really just anybody who wanted to tell me what I couldn't do. And a lot of that kind of stems from me coming out of my shell. I definitely wasn't a big kid, but one really serious event led to me, I think, getting more brazen with myself before I got under control. And it's sad because when I look back on it, if that one particular instance had been controlled, and this was kind of an ongoing event, I would say between 7th and 8th grade. Now, if this had been controlled, who knows what the rest of my year would have looked like that year, and if I would have went on to do some of the things that I said, and I definitely won't be including some of those in this podcast. But this one instance, I definitely will, because it was a game changer for me. So I had a kid, and we will call him Guy. So Guy was just making fun of me, man. Straight up making fun of me. I didn't know how to defend myself properly. I was getting overly aggressive and giving him many opportunities to keep picking on me. And there was no size thing. Like, he might have been taller than me, but there was no competition. Okay. So it wasn't like that, but I was in my own head in that I knew I was smart enough to mentally outwit this kid, but he just somehow always found a way to find those words that would really set me off, right? And this would just go on and on, like I said, in between 7th and 8th grade. And to the point where I had started to draw lines in the sand and he would continue to step over them, right? And there was a point when we had one of these council meetings in between 7th, 8th grade at some point. And I remember mentioning something about this kid. So just saying, Guy has been really messing with me, and I don't really know what to do about it. Counselor suggested, have you talked to your teachers? Have you talked to anybody else about this? I said, no, not really. I thought that it wasn't that big of a deal, but it's really bothering me. Anyway, they basically suggested, go talk to your teachers, the ones that you might have the class with. Okay. And so I did. I remember going specifically in one class became such a problem where this guy was just going back and forth with me, back and forth with me. It would be making fun of my brother about something one day. It would be making fun of my mom, classic your mama jokes maybe, but over the line to the point where I said it needed to stop. And it continued. And this was in our health and fitness class. I remember because it was a 3-gym cycle and 1 health class. So it was building up during one of these gym cycles that was in a classroom. So we were learning about whatever the body, its functions. And I don't remember exactly. I'm trying to remember the instance that led to the first physical altercation. But I want to say he said something about my brother, something just offensive, or maybe I'll have my brother kick your brother's ass or something like that. I don't know what it was, but all I know was I pushed him up against the chalkboard in the class and I said, "You better watch your mouth, because next time, well, let's just hope there isn't a next time." Now, I said something along those lines. I was fussy. I had no idea what to say. All I know is I was enraged by what he was saying, and it needed to stop. And at this point, there's nothing going on with my grandparents either. So it's not even getting to that point. And so we laid into it. We're starting to head into now. We're getting into the winter time. It's the second semester. We'll call it second quarter of the school year. And now we're in a health class. Okay. Being in health, you're in a classroom. Now I remember I'm sitting next to a buddy of mine who, I haven't talked to this man in a while, man. Anthony, if you're out there, bud, you're a great fucking kid. And anyway, so very recently made, this is a middle school friend, had never met him before in my life. I think 6th grade or 7th grade might have been when I met him. Anyway, this kid Anthony is sitting next to me, and I just remember it was not necessarily daily, but it was a lot of bullshit that I was taking from this kid sitting behind me, Guy. And Guy's just going off and off and off. And I just remember I turn over to Anthony and I go, what do you think? Should I just punch this kid right now? And in that moment, I think Anthony, I don't know if he wanted to see something cool or if he really felt that this kid was going over the line. So I gave him one chance, and this was the first line in the sand that I was willing to actually establish. And I said, "Guy, if you say one more word, I'm going to punch you in the face." I just remember he leaned forward and said one more, and I didn't let him finish whatever he was going to say. I stood up and I beat him right in the nose, one shot. Okay. One of the best feelings of my life. But, okay, here's a silver lining. After that first initial push, that first initial physical altercation, I went up to my teacher, okay, and I won't call him out by name. We'll just say Mr. R. So Mr. R, I go up to him and I say, "I don't know if you just saw what just happened, but this kid is going over the line. There's not much that's going to stop me from punching him unless you were to separate us. Get him seated away from me, keep him away from me, because he's really getting on my nerves." And Mr. R, he acknowledged it, did nothing about it. And like I said, when we were seated for health, he was right behind me, this guy. So, yeah, he got what he got. And looking back on it, I just wonder, when I first mentioned Guy's name in that first counseling interview, if something could have been done to remedy that. Or at least I thought maybe that's what counseling was for. All these anti-bullying things, all these things that you see nowadays, did they really help? And in my opinion, no. Because, I said that really weird. Because when you look at it realistically, no matter what you're going to put in front of a kid, if he's going through it, if he's the one that is getting whatever treatment at home, he's getting made fun of by his parents, maybe it's even worse, maybe he's getting molested by his parents or beaten by his parents, you can't put enough information in front of that kid to tell him to not take it out on other kids. It's going to be a natural inclination. And even if it's verbal abuse, even if it's completely taking advantage of people, manipulating them, taking their lunch money, so to speak, right? The best way, unless someone is actually really compromised, physically, mentally, all of the above, the best way to learn about what a bully does and how to take care of a bully is to experience a bully, right? And in my experience, bullies come in all shapes and sizes. That one guy that I mentioned earlier, yeah, he was a bully, but it was mental. It wasn't physical. It was mental. Right? It took a physical reaction from me to stop it because, and I understand why, because if I initially took a physical action and maybe took it outside of the classroom, it probably would have been over that instant. But it took me a lot of courage to build up over, like I said, between 7th and 8th grade, making all this stuff happen. It took a long time for me to build up that courage and even to ask somebody does this seem like the right thing to do? Because I was afraid. I was in a shell. And I really didn't feel like the system was out there to support me, specifically my teacher, who I love to this day. He's a great guy, but I really wish he paid attention in this moment. He went on to make light of it and make some jokes about it, acknowledging, but I can't help but look back. Does it really shine a good light on what the system does and how it goes about responding to a clear example of a situation that needs an intervention, right? And this is just my personal experience. Now, moving on, actually, I don't want to move on quite just yet. That experience became something otherworldly when people took a notion of me being an asshole and ran with it. I wasn't shy about holding the title, but it didn't make sense to me how I was an asshole when I was the one who stood up for myself. I couldn't really understand that, but I ran with it. I liked the term asshole for the moment for some reason. I was really fucked up. And I did some things that I really wasn't proud of afterward, to this day regretting that, some decisions that really changed the way that I went. But nothing, I would say, evil, right? Where some people wanted to paint me as evil for this event. And a lot of them made it out to be a religion thing or a racist thing, which was really sad because it made people around me assume the worst in me without getting my side of the story. So that one really sucked. And like I said, possible intervention by the school system. You never know. That might have never happened. That person might have been removed. I might have been removed from the class. We might have been separated. Who knows? Now, the next thing, and we're already 30 minutes in here to a solo episode. I can't believe it. So you're tired of my voice. Get the heck out of here. If not, subscribe, share. I love you guys. And I got one more story. School counseling. When I was in high school, one of the events that I can't even get over. Okay, it's kind of like a combo event. Two things happen, but I'll make it quick. Not that I can't get over, but I can't understand why someone would act in the way that they did, and that is my counselor. So, like I said, leading off of my other story, if you didn't listen, started these job inquiries, seeing what we wanted to do for life in 6th, 7th, 8th grade. And it builds into high school when you have this whole platform. I forget the name of it at this point, but everybody knows it. I'm just an idiot and honestly don't want to remember it. But you upload all this stuff and it tells you what you might want to actually do in life and what schools might be good for you. And it is like an algorithm. It was obviously one of the first iterations of trying to computerize and numerize the way that we put kids into schools. And when you're doing this, you're taking so many different aspects of a kid's life and putting them onto a computer and making them think. And to be honest, it put you to a point where I didn't even know what the hell I wanted to do. Just being flat out honest, didn't know what the hell I wanted to do. And my biggest guess was that because I was, in my opinion, one of my best friends was one of my cousins, and I emulated him. He was one of my heroes. He went to a big school for college and did really well. Ended up going for engineering. And because I really looked highly after him, and I mentioned him a lot in conversation with my counselor, they started to push me to follow that track. Now, one of the initial things I really wanted to do was and you have to do this in, I believe, your sophomore year of high school, if I'm not mistaken, was to try to go and proceed with going into VOTEC, or a technical school, as a part of my schooling. So basically half of my day would be split going to Montville High School and half of the day would be going to the technical school. And because of, I'm summarizing a little bit here, but the basic gist is because of all of the things I'd mentioned previously, as well as the fact that I was performing well in school, like grades wise, that I had too much potential and that wasn't probably a good career path for me. So they steered me away from me asking that I really was interested in, can you please let me go into this? Can we work it into my schedule? They steered me away from something that I really wanted to do in the moment, that I do to this day, I think would be extremely beneficial to me if I had done it. And they steered me away from that and then led me on and fed me. And all of a sudden, so I'm supposed to be going into a big school for engineering. And in junior year, more events happen in my family, whatnot, in my freshman year. So I'm really recovering. I'm doing really well in school. In junior year, my year that you're supposed to be putting all your applications out, getting your SATs, your ACTs, whatever you're doing. And my counselor quit on me. So I have a brand new counselor who has no idea who I am, no idea what my likes and interests are, And even then, I'm building off lies from my old counselor. So we get a knife in our whole recruiting process. Basically, I had to figure out how to do all this stuff alone, how to apply for schools. I sent them all in myself. I figured things out, but it was all based on the research that I had done with my previous counselor. And so coming into this and doing all my school visits and whatnot, I went out and I viewed schools that just didn't make sense for me logically. I mean, it's not that I wouldn't have performed if I went, but to be honest, I didn't even know if I wanted to do it. I didn't really know if I wanted to be an engineer. Really, all I wanted to do was work and help the world in any way, shape, or possible. But to bankrupt myself to go to a school that was outrageously expensive because maybe I can make one connection, that wasn't jiving well with me, especially at that point. And I would have to go on these visits, and I would actually have to get to the point of putting my name on documents to realize what a mistake it was to let these counselors push me through in the direction that made most sense because of the algorithm, because of questions that I started answering 6th, 7th, 8th grade, and neglecting to answer either questions of, can you protect me in my middle school years, or in my high school years of misguiding me, in my opinion, because they wanted to listen to the computer and what it told them and what I might be good at, instead of listening to what me, the person, wanted to head into. And you look back where we started this whole conversation, where I started blathering, and understanding that all of this technology, right? Even in those days when I was in 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, the phones had us. These things were in. I had an iPhone already in 7th, 8th grade. The world was very close to what it is now, especially when you're talking about Google and stuff. Remove the Zoom, remove the online conferencing. That stuff wasn't quite there yet. You got to wait for COVID for that stuff. But when you think about Chromebooks, when you think about iPads, when you think about whatever, that stuff was in when I was in high school. And all these algorithms that now massive companies are built off of because they know how to work the numbers behind the scene. They know the code, right? That they're building and selling for so many different people. All that stuff has been building, right? Obviously, before even my time in school, but when you think about it, for school, for education, all of this learning and behind the scenes computerizing, it's been affecting our up and coming generation at least a few years before me. Because at that point, like I said, I think a big change is making the kids have computers, right? For me, by the time I was in high school and by the time you kind of needed a computer for school, I had my own. So I didn't need to have the Chromebook and it wasn't mandatory. But even still, so much of my experience was done on a computer. I had to learn, how to draw. My drafting stuff is on a computer, which I actually love, but it's just another point that used to be done pencil with artistry and a real craft, and now is done with a computer doing perfect lines. So as we take a step back, we look at that 3,000-foot view, that airplane view, right? I think what we're doing to ourselves is dehumanizing ourselves. And I think it would be a very good thing for us people this year, especially, to take a step back, recognize what kind of damage being in the know all the time, especially now, what keeping up with the Joneses or what trying to be something that you're not really does to you as a person. Because, well, like, let's face it, we're not really becoming people anymore. The more that this thing learns about you, the more it's going to create that reality that it wants you to be in. Okay. And maybe it's coming from your brain. Maybe you could think of it as it's following your likes or it's tracking yourself. But I think we need to recognize as a people, right, that everything that we're doing should have purpose, and everything that makes us people is beautiful, right? That's my take on it. You might have a little bit of a different take, but I think we can all come to grips with a reality that's pretty close to that. All right. And if maintaining a beautiful people is our goal as a human race, as Americans, we need to make sure that we grow comfortable with the ugly truth, with the stuff that needs to come out, stuff that needs to be revealed, or honestly, the goodness, right? We need to make room for truth, for people to honestly come out, be good human beings, get you something worthwhile into your hands, and, well, make your lives better. If you can't surround yourself with people like that, or you got people that are too sucked into what this thing's telling them, if ChatGPT is writing their life story, well, I don't really have many words for that. And to be honest, those people can live and let live. I will live and let live. But let's get to a better peoplehood. Let's get to a better place. And I think one of the biggest things to do is, come comment on me. Let me know what you thought of my takes here. Engage in the conversation and let me know I'm not alone in thinking that we have a possibility to really build a great future and a great technologically driven space. Or maybe we're the leaders of technological innovation, but maybe doing so responsibly with an asterisk there, right? Drink responsibly, innovate responsibly. I think we need to look at what we're doing to us as a people with all of this constant chasing after the next, and kind of reevaluate what kind of mindset we're instilling in a people that is never satisfied with having something just amazing. Because, damn, America is pretty amazing, and if we lost it, well, I don't think we have anybody else to blame but ourselves.
I want to be something, not nothing. Trapped inside my dream and I'm running away from these demons. But the feeling's so good, I'ma keep dreaming.